Hello, Karen here from Karen Gracie Equine Success and Off the Track Thoroughbred Success. And this is a coffee chat. A coffee chat about a topic that I really would like to share with you and some education to do with your Off the Track Thoroughbred. And this one is going to be an equine nutrition one. I'm very passionate about equine nutrition. I think my last one was about equine nutrition as well. And I want to touch on a particular topic in this coffee chat because of a problem that I see quite often in a lot of these Facebook groups and in members of my academy and online courses, and also in my Facebook group. And that is behavior problems with horses and feeding wheat. Now, wheat is a grain that is seen in a lot of horse feeds, particularly overseas. Over in the UK and the US, there seems to be a lot of the big horse feed companies jam-pack their feeds full of wheat. We have some very good equine feed mills here in Australia. So I think we're very lucky here. We don't have the amount of wheat middlings and grain byproducts added into our horse feeds here, particularly with the good companies like you've got the High Gain and Prides. They're very good equine only horse feed mills, which is good to start with because they're only processing feeds for horses, not other livestock. But also too, they tend to have a high quality feed, and a lot of them now have your super fibres in them, and they have some very good grain-free feed options for horses. As we're learning a lot more about the horse's digestive system and equine health and gastric ulceration and that, the awareness of how detrimental feeding grains and high starch, like a high starch, high sugar diet to horses are. And hence, as the education and knowledge increases in the equine community and the equine world, the companies are getting on board and creating some good quality grain-free options or very high fibre options for horses. So now let's going back to my topic, which is wheat. So what I've noticed I get into horse groups and that, and a lot of people will have a thing, oh, my horse has just changed, his behaviour's changed. I saw one particular one with this video of this girl, and she said he's just really on edge, and she said I can't she had stirrups. She had her stirrups off the saddle, and she put the saddle on, and she was trying to get the stirrups back on the saddle, and her horse was just, his eyeballs were popping out his head. He was skitterish. He was really scared. He was just on edge. Very spooky. And this is another common thing that I see. My horse is very spooky. He's shying at everything. And I see them all the time. So the first thing I always ask is, what are you feeding your horse? What's in the diet? Number one question. What are you feeding your horse? And quite often, a lot of these feeds will be contain wheat or wheat byproducts, or grain byproducts, or grain. So let's talk about, I think I've spoken before, grain is a starch. I'll quickly just touch on. So we have our grains and sugars and that. So your grains are your non-structural carbohydrates. And our grasses and our hays, like our low sugar grasses and our hays and our chaffs, and the super fibres like beet pulp and soya hulls and lupin hulls. So they're all what's called structural carbohydrates. So structural carbohydrates are digested. They're absolutely necessary for equine digestive health, and they're digested in the hindgut of the horse. My dogs are going to start barking here, so don't bark, guys. I have lots of dogs. Now, our non-structural carbohydrates, which are our starches and sugars, they are found in grains, grain byproducts, Poppy, I always have dogs barking in my videos. They're found in grains, grain byproducts like your wheat middlings and your distillers grains. They're found in your rich pastures. So, you know, the high production grasses that we have so often now, and a big problem that I've had with my horses is your ryegrasses and your phalaris and your clovers and that. So they're actually full of starch. So we have, particularly in certain times of the year, such as autumn and spring. So we need to be very careful about green grass and certain grasses, as well as our grains. So now let's look at our grains are digested. So as the hay and like fibres are digested in the hindgut, the grains are supposed to be. So grains go into the stomach and digested and broken down in the stomach and the small intestine. Now what happens is, because grains are very high in sugar and as I said, starch. So what happens is it increases blood glucose. So I've just got my notes down here because I put so what happens when the horse is digesting starch in the small intestine, sugar is rapidly released into the bloodstream as glucose. So starches raise the blood glucose level, and as we know with humans, you know, when your blood glucose level raises, particularly rapidly, it can cause a lot of problems. Not only you get your ups and downs, but as we know, we've got our glycemic index. So not only is it an issue in humans when we get high blood glucose levels, but it's a massive problem in horses. And starch is one of the big problems when it comes to increasing blood glucose levels. What happens is when the blood glucose levels increase, the pancreas, then insulin levels in the body increase. And that's when we start to get all our insulin resistant problems, laminitis, and our metabolic disorders in horses. And metabolic disorders in horses are running rampant at the moment. And it's been interesting, it sort of coincided with the introduction to all these complete feeds that have come on the market in the last, I don't know, would we say 50, 60 years, something like that. So I'll just touch down on my notes. As you know, this is a coffee chat. Whoops. And in coffee chats, I just have notes everywhere. Nothing's planned, nothing's organised. I organise a bit, but it's basically just having a chat and talking about a very valuable topic. And I'm very passionate about equine nutrition. It's, you know, the first thing you need to look at is your horse's diet. And we know nowadays with humans, look at the children, you know, we know that children can get so easily affected by foods, and the increase in ADHD and autism, and it's a lot of it is to do with the modern diet that we have. And it's the same thing with horses. So let's go to weight. Now, giving weight to horses is like giving a bag of candy to a child. Massive, big sugar hit. Okay, so you can imagine horses, this sugar hit is going to come out in behavioural problems in horses. Hence, when as I said, some of the videos and problems that I'm seeing is a lot of the problems that people come with is my horse is spooky, he's hyper reactive, he's on edge. Particularly this video I saw with this poor horse could not even get the stirrups up on the saddle without him just literally panicking. It's like he looked like he'd been flogged. That's how bad he was, but he hadn't. What he had instead was wheat in his diet. So let me just go to my notes. So I just jotted down here, so we know our non-structural non-structural carbohydrates, which is our grains, which are, and also sugars, so your molasses and things like that. But we know that this can cause hyperreactivity in horses, particularly too much grain. Let me just check I've just got notes everywhere, so I don't want to confuse you with, because I'm talking about wheat in particular, and I'm going to go back to wheat in the moment, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what grains are and what they do. So I'm not going to go into, I did put a lot of notes in here about your metabolic disorders. If you wanted me to talk more about that, let me know in the comments. We're talking about insulin resistance. There's a lot of metabolic disorders that are out there at the moment with horses. Okay. So now, one particular grain, wheat, which is absolutely jam-packed in so many feeds in Australia, but not in Australia. Yes, companies do put them in there, particularly your more or less known companies like our High Gain and our Prides. There are definitely products that they have wheat in, but you'll get a lot of these pony pellets, sport horse pellets, and yeah, all different companies. And usually one of the first things that they'll have in there is wheat middlings or wheat meal, something like that. Wheat is also bran, your wheat bran. So why is wheat bad? So wheat is one of the, has the highest glycemic index of pretty much any other grain. So what that means, let me just go to my notes. Sorry, I'm all over the place here, guys. Oh, not only the glycemic index, it's so complicated. I just do so much research all the time, and I have a passion about, I have a bit of a rant when I see wheat in equine feeds, because it is so bad for the horse in so many ways. So one, I'll try and simplify my coffee chat here. One, wheat will cause behavioural issues. Very highly likely, if not nearly 100% guaranteed, to cause, a little bit of hyperreactivity. So now the reason for that is because the glycemic index of sugar is so high. It's actually wheat will increase blood sugar levels more than, just as much, if not even more, than table sugar. So that's how high the glycemic index is of wheat, both in humans and horses. Now, we know the detrimental effects of giving humans a high sugar diet, and horses' digestive systems are so sensitive, so sensitive. They're not designed to have starch at all. So imagine just absolutely bombarding their digestive system with such a high starch, high glycemic food such as wheat. So another problem with wheat is not only is it going to increase blood sugar levels rapidly, it's also going to then, because of the blood glucose levels increasing, it's going to increase insulin in the horse's body. And then that just ends up, when too much insulin is released in the horse's body, that's when we start to get our laminitis, we start to get our metabolic disorders coming into play. It just causes so many problems in the horse's body. It creates inflammation. So let's just go through. Where was my other one? So another thing, wheat has, so we know wheat has gluten, but the thing is with wheat, wheat has the highest gluten of any grain. Now, gluten is very hard for the body, for the horse's body to digest, and it becomes very resistant to digestion. So that's a negative thing in the first place, because if the horse can't digest something, it ends up in the hindgut, and then what happens? It starts to ferment and cause acidity in the hindgut, which is another thing that I was going to point out. Wheat is very acidic. So what it's going to do, it's going to change the pH of the horse's hindgut from neutral to a very acidic environment. It creates inflammation all the way through the horse's body. Inflammation is going to cause inflammation causes a lot of diseases. Not only is it going to damage the gut membrane, but it's also going to cause things like arthritis, joint pain. It's inflammation throughout the whole systemic, like the whole digestive system and systemically. So why is this? Now, we look at wheat. Now, this was interesting, and I've always been very tentative of feeding wheat to my horses since way back in 2000 when I used to work in riding schools, and we used to make a bran mash for my horses, for the riding school horses. Now, I had my little off-the-track thoroughbred moto back then, and I gave him a bran mash and he absolutely just broke out in these massive welts. He just had this horrific reaction to it. He had to go on steroids, but that was just like, oh my God, that was pollard actually that I was feeding. I gave him a feed of pollard. So he was obviously very, very allergic and sensitive to wheat back then. I never fed him wheat again after that. But it just goes to show how much damage and inflammation it can cause in a horse's body if they've got a sensitivity to it. Now, that doesn't mean that horses that don't react aren't getting affected by it in a negative way. And why is that? Because it's very high in starch. It's going to increase blood glucose levels, which is going to cause increased and rapid release of insulin. And then we get into all our metabolic disorders if that continues to happen. Also, too, we talked about the gluten. So wheat contains the highest amount of gluten. And gluten... So it's interesting, our wheat, I'm completely going off topic here, but our wheat that we had back before the 1950s, and wheat goes way back to the biblical times, but it was very different than with the wheat we have now. Now, the wheat that we have now has been genetically modified and hybridized. So what does that mean? We've changed the wheat because the wheat today has been crossbred to be a lot more commercially viable. They want it to be shorter. They want it to grow faster. They want it to be resistant to insects and certain other things that can kill the crops. And I had just the notes down here back before. So the chromosomes that our original wheat had was 14 chromosomes. Our wheat that we have now has 48 chromosomes. So that just tells you how much our wheat pretty much is not the wheat. It's not the wheat that we had previous to 1950s. I think it was around the 1950s they started to play with, started to crossbreed different types of wheats to create the more robust and commercially viable type of wheat. Now, we know that most any genetically modified foods are not good for our health and definitely not good for our horse's health. So when we're feeding wheat, we're pretty much feeding a genetically modified food, a crossbred wheat. And that's going to have no positive effects, but only detrimental effects on horses. Now, another thing with wheat, it's the only food, pretty much the only food other than like your sugar that affects the central that it changes behavior, that can change temperament and behavior. Now, this is really important when it comes to horses because a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems when people are having problems with their horses, it's because of behavioural issues. Now, training, if your horse is affected dietary and that's affecting negatively on their behaviour, no matter what training you're going to do, it is not going to change it. In fact, it's going to make it worse and it's going to make you extremely frustrated. And your poor horse is absolutely on edge. I know when I've had to, I get affected by wheat. I was affected by wheat yesterday. I get sort of very blurry in the head, like I just sort of can't think properly. And it's a horrible feeling. But not only we can get very blurry vision, confused, and it has, you know, sometimes it can cause a lot of lethargy in people. Look, it probably does with horses as well. But one of the things that it does do because of increasing blood sugar levels is create hyperactivity and very spooky behavior. Not only that, now this is my notes that I had here. Gluten affects the adrenal glands, so it affects the fight response, and gluten also affects the liver. So it's just not good to feed. And wheat stands, I wrote this down because this was very interesting. Wheat stands almost alone as a food with central nervous system effects. It is one of the few foods that can alter behavior and temperament. So yes, it's increasing your blood sugar levels, but it also affects the whole central nervous system of the horse. So, and that's interesting, but wheat is one of the only foods, I presume probably almost alone. So I'm not sure what other food would affect the central nervous system. But why do we want to feed wheat to horses? And at all. But what really concerns me is feeds that are marketed for gastric health, low starch, low sugar, even grain-free. I've seen grain-free feeds advertised, and then you have a look and it's got wheat byproducts in it. So that is wheat. Wheat is a grain. The byproducts are what's left over from the grain production. So pretty much the byproducts are the sweepings off the floor. So I think I've gone through the detrimental effects of wheat. Let me just see if I want something else that I want to say about it. Because it makes me go on a bit of a rant when I see all these well-known feed companies overseas, not in Australia, pump wheat into their feeds. Before I go into some particular feeds that I wanted to go through with you, I'll just make sure that I haven't missed any topics. That goes up. So I wanted to also touch on insulin. I've put some notes down on insulin resistance, but I think we can use that for another topic because wheat definitely causes insulin can definitely cause insulin resistance. And what was really frightening is I've seen some of this in the metabolic insulin resistant Facebook groups, people talking about their horses, and then it's asked what they fed, and they're feeding one of these feeds with wheat. So that is extremely frightening. Now, as we said, wheat increases blood sugar even more than table sugar. So any horse that has insulin resistance absolutely should not be getting any grain and absolutely no wheat. Okay, so I think I've covered my little notes there talking about wheat and what's so bad about it. There's not one good thing about wheat. Nothing. If you want to feed a grain, you probably, I'm not one on grains, and if you've got high level performance horses and you need to add a bit of that grain, you can go for a little bit of some oats or a tiny bit of barley. It's and you're only really wanting that muscle glycogen, fuel for muscle glycogen. You don't want to be pumping your horse full of grains if they're resting, if they're anything. If you're not doing eventing, or you're not doing, or you don't own a thoroughbred racehorse, or you're not doing an absolutely extreme high level sport, you do not need to feed grain in any shape or form, and you do not need to feed wheat. Now let's look at some of these feeds that I'm horrified about. And I wanted to go to, now some of my members of my group, and that will probably see this video, and I know that we've been through, when they first joined the group, they had some issues with their horses. And one of the first things I asked, and this was spookiness and hyperactivity and that, one of the first things I asked is what their diet is. And I think every one of them had wheat in the diet, and literally within few days of them taking the wheat out, their horses transformed, started to quieten down, be calm. It's just amazing. I just feel so sorry for horses that are pumped full of this horrible food. As I said, if you want to feed a grain, if you need the energy, you've got to keep your diet clean for your horses. Avoid these complete feeds unless you know exactly what's in them. And what I find is a lot of people will feed these feeds and have no idea the ingredients. And a lot of these companies don't put the ingredients on the bag. You actually have to go in and Google and try and find them out yourself, which is what I've done here. So I want to go through some here that I see quite often fed with horses that are having behavior problems. I've got all these pages opened. Now, let's look. Now, as I said, one of the main my clients, a couple of them are in Australia, so we do have this same problem here in Australia, but we do have a couple of very good equine-only mills that have some great wheat-free and grain-free options. So let's look at one of the first feeds. I saw someone that was in the PSSM group. What is it? I get so confused with all these metabolic disorders. Let me have a look. All right. Let me just have a look here. I've actually got 2 horses with insulin resistance. Now that's been caused from pasture. And as I said, so it's not only wheat that can cause these problems, but we're talking about wheat in particular, about the behavioural issues that can happen. So you've got PSSM in horses and PSSM2. This is a form of tying up, and this is often caused by diet. Now, this was interesting because in this group, owners had horses with PSSM. It's polysaccharide storage myopathy in horses, which is a form of tying up, muscle cramping. Now, let's look at the feed that they were feeding them. Now, this is just my opinion, but it's a lot of research. I mean, it's very well known that you don't feed a laminitic horse grain. You don't feed a horse with metabolic disorders grain. So the feed that they were feeding them is Triple Tribute Essential K Balancer. So let's look at this one. Now I've got that. I'm doing my video on my phone here, so I'm just on my laptop, and I'm going to go back here and find the Triple K. That's another one. Maybe I closed it and I might have to open it up again. That's a terrible one, that one. Okay, I'm going to Google it. What is it? Tribute? Essential. Oh, here we go. I think these feeds are in Canada, is it? There's another one. So I'm just going to show you what's in the feeds and how damaging marketing can be. and why it's really important to read the ingredients on your horse feed before you buy them. Triple essential K ingredients. It's hard to find the ingredients sometimes too, which I find very interesting. So let's look at triple K essential. Sorry I can't show this on the screen here, guys. I'm recording on my phone, but if you wanted to look it up, Tribute Essential K. Okay, so this is advertised as a pelleted low non-structural carbohydrate ration balancer. Ideal for breeding, growing, and performance horses. So let's have a look here. So the first ingredient is dehulled soybean meal, which is issues in itself. Ground extruded whole soybeans, dehydrated alfalfa meal, and then we have wheat middlings. Fourth on the list of the ingredients is wheat middlings. Wheat middlings is wheat. It's the wheat byproduct. It is so detrimental for horses. Now we know that the gluten in the wheat, okay, is very hard to digest. We also know that gluten affects the central nervous system, and it is a high glycemic food. So why would they put this? This is not promoted. So this is promoted as a low non-structural carbohydrate. So wheat's not low. Is not a low non-structural carbohydrate. As we know, it is extremely high, if not one of the highest non-structural carbohydrates glycemic indexes we have. So why is it in this feed? But I just wanted to show this is being fed to PSSM horses with metabolic disorders, and some people listen, some people don't, but I would never feed this. I would never feed any of these feeds to my horses ever. But that is the essential K. So I just wanted to point out another thing with this. It shouldn't be fed to any horse with metabolic disease, disorders or laminitis, but it is fourth down. It's still very high. It's the fourth on the list of the ingredients. It's not number one, but it's still up there, and it could be equally as much wheat middlings in it as there is dehulled soybean meal. The only thing I wanted to say with the dehulled soybean meal and the extruded soybeans is there's a lot of issues with soybeans not being cooked correctly. And there was a post actually in FeedXL I saw, which was tested on some of these feeds. And I mentioned this in our last coffee chat. Soybeans have what's called a trypsin inhibitor in it. And the trypsin inhibitor is inhibited, is nullified when the soybean meal is cooked correctly at a certain temperature. Now, a lot of these companies, and I would nearly 99.9% guarantee it, these soybean meals have not been correctly heat treated. You just have to look with the other ingredients in it. And this confirms what I'm saying by someone who actually had the test for trypsin inhibitor, tested the feeds and found trypsin inhibitor in these feeds. So that's just something else to think about when buying these prepackaged feeds, prepackaged complete feeds. So let's have a look at another one. So this is being fed to horses with metabolic disorders, which is not good at all. We'll get rid of that one. Now, another one I see fed a lot is, what's this one? Strategy. Oh no, that's this one is, well, this is a strategy professional formula. Okay, so this one seems to be targeted more to performance horses, but this one has processed grain byproducts, grain products, roughage products, molasses products, forage products. Basically, they're saying they can't guarantee what's being put into the feed and that they are grabbing whatever they can at the time. So that's extremely dangerous for many, many reasons. Mycotoxins can be in grain and all of that, but you don't know what you're feeding your horse. You have no idea what type of grains are going in there. You don't know how old they are. You don't know if they've got molds and fungi on them. So that is one of the strategy professional formula from Purina Mills. I wanted to look at some of these gut supplements that are, so we've got Purina Outlast here. Now, Purina Outlast is advertised as a gastric support supplement which is formulated to support gastric health and proper pH. It is estimated that up to 90% of active horses experience gastric discomfort affecting health, attitude, and performance. So they've made this product to help with any issues with your gastric health in horses. So let's look at the ingredients, if they have it on here. See, they don't even have the ingredients on here. That's what I'm saying. They don't even have the ingredients. So it's very shifty, isn't it? So I have to try and find out where the ingredients are. We're looking at the Outlast, aren't we? Oops. Oh no, my okay, so let's just have a look at Purina Outlast ingredients. So I always recommend doing your research, finding out what is in your horse feed. Now here we go, Purina Outlast Gastric Support Supplement. Ingredients: dehydrated alfalfa meal is the first ingredient. The second ingredient is wheat middlings. Then you've got seaweed-derived calcium, cane molasses, magnesium oxide, and citric acid. I mean, that's just disgraceful. Dehydrated alfalfa meal is a little bit of alfalfa. Wheat middlings is so detrimental on equine digestive health, and it causes massive inflammation in the horse's body. And this is actually, wheat damages the gut lining, as I mentioned, the gut lining membranes. So this is advertised by Purina. It's called Purina Outlast Gastric Support Supplement. So what's in this? Let's have a look at breaking it down. What is in this product that is supporting gastric health? They're saying, so we know alfalfa is high in calcium, so they are using alfalfa meal and will say that it's adding a bit of calcium. Wheat middlings is completely opposite and absolutely detrimental to gastric health. They've just got some more seaweed-derived calcium. They've thrown in cane molasses. They've got a bit of magnesium oxide. There is nothing in this product that is good for gastric health except a little bit of calcium, which is completely wiped out by all the bad stuff. It's very easy to supplement with calcium without giving them something as detrimental as this. There is nothing. This is complete false advertising. It's disgraceful. I don't understand what the laws are overseas, but absolutely disgraceful that they have a feed like that on the market. So please learn about the ingredients on your horse's feeds, because in the end, the horses are the ones that suffer. You suffer as well because you're having behavior issues with your horses or health issues. You're being influenced by marketing, but the marketing is criminal what they do. So let's look at another one. That was the Outlast. Here we go. Here's another one. Triple Crown. Ooh, wait a second. Let me just, I've done the whole screen here. How do I make my screen smaller? There. Oh no, what have I done? Triple Crown low starch pellet. This is called Triple Crown low starch. Ideal for mature horses, ponies, metabolic horses. Features whole grain, alfalfa. Oh no, features whole grain, alfalfa and molasses free, low starch and low sugar, lower potassium. Helps support metabolic diseases, HYPP and allergies. So they're saying here it is free of whole grain, alfalfa and molasses. It's low starch and low sugar. Triple Crown low starch contains no whole grains, molasses or alfalfa meal. Ingredients many horses owners associate with hyperactivity and allergies. So they're saying their feed is great for hyperactivity. Ready for this, guys? Wheat middlings is the #1 ingredient on this feed. Wheat middlings. Wheat middlings is the leftovers, all that of the grain by grain production, wheat production. Wheat middlings is a grain. Let me just Google it for you. And wheat middlings can be full of whole grains. It can be full of anything. It's what comes out when they're processing the wheat. Wheat middlings are the product of the wheat milling process that is not flour. So it's just all the leftover stuff. Here we go. Wheat middlings is a byproduct of wheat flour production obtained by the milling of wheat grains. It consists principally of fragments of the outer skins and of particles of grain containing variable amounts of endosperm. So it not only contains the outer fragments of the outer skins, but it contains particles of the grain containing variable amounts of the endosperm. Wheat middlings are often mixtures of different types of milling offal. They are typically richer in starch and less coarse than wheat bran, and poorer in starch and coarser than wheat feed flour. So wheat middlings is your grain, your endosperm. It's a mixture of everything. So once again, this is false advertising. Okay, they cannot say it's not. They cannot say it doesn't contain whole grains, because wheat middlings does contain whole grains. We can't help but have the whole grains. Parts of it fall on the floor in the process. So this is, once again, criminal. This is Triple Crown low starch pellet, saying it is suitable for metabolic horses. It doesn't matter that they say that they don't even have the NSC, the non-structural, the NSC of it here. The second ingredient is soybean hulls. The third ingredient is ground beet pulp. The fourth ingredient is distiller's dried grains. They're whole grains. Disgusting. Once again, I see this fed to metabolic horses so often. These horses are having a lot of health problems. So that's that one. I won't leave this video to go on too long, but I just really wanted to highlight I'll just quickly have a look at, did we do the Purina strategy? I think you get the idea anyway, guys, don't you? That there is so much false marketing and false advertising out there. Purina. We did the Outlast. We didn't do the Enrich, didn't we? can't find one good feed overseas. I mean, I'm sure you guys know there's some good feeds over there, but I can't find one. When people reach out to me, I think you've got someone that does her. Okay, Purina, a rich plus ration balancing feed. Helps to balance the feeds. Blah, blah, blah. Corn-free and oat-free. So they're saying that it's corn-free and oat-free. They don't say it contains wheat. I bet you anything they're not going to have the ingredients on here. So you go to these, they don't have the ingredients. Yes, the wheat's going to make your horse fat and round, and it may make them shiny and things like that. Puts unhealthy fat on them. And this is also a problem too. When people get off the track thoroughbreds, they want them to hold condition. They don't want them to lose weight. And quite often an off the track thoroughbred straight out of racing is going to lose weight. Particularly their metabolism is so high when they're race fit, and as their metabolism, it takes a while for their metabolism to slow down. And not only that, their digestive system is compromised and so used to being able to, so used to being pumped full of grains that you don't want to be feeding the amount of grains to an off the track thoroughbred you've got out of racing that they've had in racing. You don't want to be feeding them grains at all. Nurture their gut health system, rehabilitate it, heal it, and you'll have a much happier horse. Let me see if I can find the ingredients for Purina Enrich Plus. Interesting, isn't it, that they don't even have the ingredients? You have to really search for them. Here we go. We should be able to find it here. Mad Barn's really good for having all this information. If you're trying to find the ingredients of one of your feeds, go to Mad Barn. Now, here we go. Enrich Plus Rationing Balancing Concentrate. First ingredient is dehulled soybean meal. Second ingredient is wheat middlings. Third ingredient is calcium carbonate. Then you've got sun-cured alfalfa, cane molasses, soybean oil. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Please be aware that wheat is really bad for your horses. It's only going to have negative effects on their whole body health. It's going to be absolutely detrimental for digestive health. It's going to cause inflammation in your horse's body. It's going to cause behavior issues. It can cause, it affects the central nervous system. It increases blood sugar levels rapidly. It's hard to digest. It's been hybridized, so crossbred. So we haven't got the same wheat as we had, 80 years ago. And the thing is, it's cheap. It costs nothing for these companies to get it off, get the byproducts and throw them into the feed. They use them as fillers, so it's cheap. They're making a ton of money on these feeds, and these feeds are full of rubbish. You would be much better to go to a natural, clean diet. I feed my horses. I don't feed my horses any prepackaged feeds anymore. I go to a natural, clean diet. They get their fibre, so you can add all the supplements that they need. You can add beautiful herbs for gut health. You've got slippery elm, aloe vera, marshmallow root. Flaxseed meal is beautiful. Get your whole flax seeds and then ground them up into flaxseed. I freshly grind them. You've got your chai seeds, lovely gut health, omega-3s. So many lovely natural feeds. Horses' diet, they need, their number one thing is long stem, low sugar forage, nice fibrous forage. At least 1.5 to 2.5% of their body weight in forage. And then you give them your smaller hard feeds. The off-the-track thoroughbred is going to need them. Even if you have something that does really well, you need to give them their supplements. But you've got such wonderful options. You've got your beet pulp. I would be wary of soybean. You can give soybean meal, but you need to make sure it's heat treated correctly. Otherwise, it has a trypsin inhibitor in it, and that stops protein absorption, which will cause atrophy in muscles, and then you get no top line. So natural diet, you can get some really good supplements, just some clean supplements. Just get your beet pulp, your flax seeds, some chia seeds. What a beautiful diet this would be. Some beet pulp, flax seeds, chia seeds, some chaff, some loosened alfalfa chaff, a little bit of oil if you wanted to put in it. I even put a little bit of canola oil. Yes, it's higher in omega-6 than in omega-3, but as long as you can balance it out, use FeedXL to balance your diet out. If you wanted that extra energy and calories for your horse, add your minerals, your salts, and all your supplements and your minerals. Beautiful. You don't need any of these feeds. You really don't. So, one, you'll save yourself a lot of money. Two, you'll absolutely do a favour for your horse and avoid them being affected mentally by detrimental feeds. And three, you're going to have a lot more many years out of your horse. I think I mentioned this. I mentioned it in my last email I sent out to my email list. I killed my off-the-track thoroughbred. I had him for Modo. My first off-the-track thoroughbred ended up passing away from liver failure. He had Cushing's disease. He was the one that reacted to the brand way back. But I worked in racing for nearly 20 years. I depended on, my coaches and everything to guide me with knowledge. I was a lot more, I didn't know, a lot more inexperienced back then than I am now. And Modo shows so many signs of gut discomfort. No one even ever, back in the early days, no one even ever recommended me having him. I don't think they could scope for horses back then, could they? But he showed it a lot. He showed his through even in my jumping lessons, he would stretch out like he wanted to wee. Not one of my coaches said that, he has gut pain. That's a sign of gut pain. As I said, back then it was a lot more inexperienced than I am now, very green. And, and then over the years I've learned and evolved, but he ended up getting Cushing's and his liver failed. It was horrific. I watched him die from liver failure. So I'm coming from experience. I have fed grain to my horses. I've fed a lot of grain to my horses and they have suffered because of it. I'm not saying never feed grain, but they don't need grain, and if you are going to feed grain, go something clean and natural and add your own supplements. Don't do these prepackaged feeds. I fed my horses grain, and one of them, Toby, my other Moto and Toby I had for my first two horses for a long while before I got another 17. But Toby had horrific laminitis that we ended up getting through, but it was terrible. And yeah, I've learnt the hard way, and I had no one to tell me. It's interesting because the internet, the wonderful thing about the internet is we can have access to so much more information, so much knowledge that we can learn. Whereas back in my day, back then, I didn't have this, as I started to learn once, because I had both Moto and Toby for around 18 years both. And obviously towards the end I realised, as I was progressing, something's not right here. And hence, this is why I'm very passionate about equine nutrition now, because I've made some mistakes, very detrimental mistakes that ended up taking my horse's life. So please, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know in the comments below. If you're watching this on YouTube, love you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do my best to upload a video every week. I'm getting a lot better. I've been a little bit disorganized. A lot's been happening lately, but lots of videos up there and continually adding new videos. And click on the link in the description because you also have access to some more information, the Facebook group if you want to join the Facebook group, and some further training links as well. So I hope you enjoyed this little coffee chat here. I'm still drinking my coffee, and let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you found this helpful. And I will see you in the next video or in the group or wherever you may be. Okay, bye.